Hello, everyone. This is the November 16th team review. We are going to review design changes, proposals, ideas for the redesign or integration, better integration, I should say, of security into the MR page. Before I do that, I do want to talk about some of the general ideas or principles for this call. Don't forget that we are not our designs. We will not offend anyone in this room intentionally. We will practice benevolent radical candor, which is to care personally but challenge directly when sending feedback. And then we will be open to receiving benevolent radical candor feedback, and will be, if necessary, willing to let go of things that aren't working. And these sessions are about candid talk, spirited debate, fun, and passion for what we do as designers for a living. So you're not going to hurt anyone's feelings. It's all about having fun, solving problems in the best way we possibly can. So with that, there's a bunch of information here about this project. This project has been going on for a very long time. We're trying to get to a point where we can make some solid decisions on design direction so we can start to figure out who's going to build it. And when I say that, I'm referring to the fact that the MR page has lots of players, it affects a lot of different groups, and therefore it affects a lot of different engineering teams. And not everyone is comfortable messing with other areas' code. So when we pick a design, the next hurdle is to try and figure out how it's going to get built, who's going to build what, and that sort of thing. So the sooner we can come to a design conclusion, the sooner we can start trying to hurdle the build hurdle that I referenced. All right. So who's this for? This is for developers first. This is all about helping them achieve their goal of merging code. And then secondarily, this is for the security engineer who will help the developer merge their code in a secure way. Jobs to be done. When I'm making changes, I want to deliver secure and performing code so I can ensure the integrity of my organization's software is not compromised. Small job or their need is product is delivered to end users, security and compliance policies are maintained, and the integrity of the organization's assets are not compromised. And you can do a deep dive on all that stuff right here. Evidence, if you've ever read the verbatims, you'll know that oftentimes people like to complain about the MR page because there's a lot happening there. There's a lot to absorb and try and parse when you're reviewing MRs or building MRs, et cetera. So we know that it's a problem at that level. Security has been requested by leadership to have a more solid integration into the MR page. Think about security, it's important, right? I mean, we've all seen all the people getting hacked. So we know from that side of things, it's important. From a business case side of things, majority of the secure features are in Ultimate, which means if we can start to get people to see them and use them, then they're more likely to upgrade to that level. So there's an importance there. There's also this aspect of shifting left, which I mentioned somewhere. I think I mentioned it up here. Yeah. So shifting left is if you're not familiar, it's the concept where the further left means earlier in the development process, we can affect something, the better off the company's overall project's going to be. So when we say shifting left for code, we mean we want to get it in the earliest hands of the people that are doing whatever they're doing when they're developing their product. So in this case, it's the developer who's committing code. So people think security is for specific security engineers, when in fact, it's really talking about the people that are writing the code. We want to help them realize that what they've written has a security vulnerability in it prior to merge. And if we can get it even sooner to that, which we're working on in the IDE, that's even better before commit. So there are lots of things we're doing. But right now, the closest we can come is in the MR page. So they've written code, they've committed it, runs a pipeline. My pipeline does a series of analyzations and then says, hey, you've got these problems, whether it's a security vulnerability or it's a policy problem that they've compliance or a security policy that they've tripped on for some reason or another. So we need to notify them of all these things so they can address it prior to merge. That's what shifting left means. Okay, I said a lot. Any questions? Oh, okay, cool. Oh yeah. Questions to consider when thinking about this. So what is the ideal indicator system for findings? So a finding is a way of thinking about a vulnerability or some sort of problem that we found in the MR. Severity icons versus blocker warning icons. This will make more sense when you look at designs. Is it preferable to have an area to display all findings of a similar type, e.g. security, code, quality, or would it be more effective to segregate these items based on their respective statuses to the MR? Blocker warning. Again, this will make more sense when you see the different designs. How should finding details be displayed? Drawer versus accordion versus something else. Okay, let's look at designs. Is there, I don't remember which is which. Reports tab, that's yours, Michael. You want to take over?
Yeah, I can do that. Let me pull it up here and then I'll share my screen. All right. Okay. So many tabs open in Figma, it's not even funny.
I don't close tabs.
Yeah,
Keep them all open.
of course. Tab hoarder,
You never
man.
know. You never.
All right. So I'll just walk through this kind of at a high level. I know this was shared about quite a while ago. But this sort of design concept was based off of an idea from the Create team a while back, where they were kind of looking at doing a restructure of the merge request experience. And part of that restructure was adding a tab for reports. And the sort of concept behind that is that's where sort of all of the automated test results from pipelines kind of get boiled down to. So the thought process is that we have.
Sorry. Can you zoom in more? I'm an old man.
Too much. Let's see what we got for zooms. Can I looking at the prototype, I can actually hop over to the designs too here, if that's easier. This better, Justin?
Yes, thank you.
Cool. So really the concept behind this is essentially to, again, or actually, sorry, I should back up and go to the first screen, which I haven't been in this file in a long time, so I'm a little familiarizing myself with it. But really the concept is that from the main overview tab, there's a lot of different noise and there's all these different security widgets right now. And we've gotten a lot of feedback, as Justin had mentioned, that it's really confusing and there's a lot going on. So I think the thought process is that we want to have an area on the main overview page that helps indicate to users that there's certain things blocking their merge request, and then basically direct them to the reports tab to be able to triage and deal with those items. So from the overview tab, you would click on one of those indicators. If a check failed, then it would take you to this reports tab. And we sort of have this concept on the sidebar here where the very top section is called blocking violations or whatever you'd want to call it. But this is where we would surface everything from all the automated reports that is blocking the merge request. And it could even go as far as surfacing things like unresolved threads or something like that as well. But essentially below that are all the individualized reports. So like security compliance, for instance, we have, it's a lot easier when I click through the prototype.
You can go back to the prototype. I can put on my old person glasses.
Fair enough. So coming through. and half the links are gone now. But anyways, the thought process is that like you'd have your list of all your blocking violations grouped by different content, and then you could grouped by the different categories, so like failed jobs, vulnerabilities, secrets, and things of that sort. And you could click through to get the details of that and then take action on those items. So this example is of a failed job where you could come in and see that the job failed, and you could directly go to the job log or retry the job from here potentially as well. And then we want to maintain some sort of a similar pattern for just basically displaying all of these different like blocking items. So this is an example of a vulnerability where you can come in, get the full vulnerability details. And then like if there's a policy, I should back up and say that if a vulnerability is showing up as a blocking item, the reason it's doing so is because it's violating the security policy. So this sort of gets back to the work that Camelia was presenting last week and she was looking into. But it's essentially you'd be able to come in and reference that policy information directly within this context as well. So that it's really easy for users to see the vulnerability, understand why it's a blocker, and then go through the whole resolution process. I gotta find where that security tab went to. Apparently it's not linked up with the design anymore. But beyond surfacing just blockers as a whole, we also wanted to create sort of a dedicated reports area. Here it is. So this would be an area to basically look at all the results of a single sort of like category. So in this case, we're looking at security compliance. And it basically allows users to come in and have a full like triage experience. So if they wanted to come in here and apply filters and try to like say they only want to look at SAST findings or only findings that are critical or so on, they'd have that control to be able to come in here and do that. And then this would work sort of in the exact same way as the blocking violations, where if you click on an item, you get the full details of it. And then we'd also be surfacing in this sort of view some sort of an indicator to show like which of these security findings are blockers and which are just sort of other things that were found but don't necessarily need to be remediated to move through to complete the merge request. So that's sort of a high level summary of this concept. I don't know if anyone has any questions or if there's anything I want to dig into more about this.
I do. I have questions.
Yeah, go ahead.
What happens when you press the close button? There's like this back forward arrow and a close button.
Yeah, sure. So it basically, let's get back to the first one here. So it's like a drawer. This concept was earlier on, so it doesn't necessarily align with our design systems or stuff yet. That's something we still have to figure out. But essentially, it's pushing the content over and creating sort of a new column for that information.
See,
and then you could
I kind of
sort
thought
of
that it would dismiss or like unblock. I was like, oh, I'm saying like, no, this one's okay. That was my assumption. So
sure, yeah, it's a valid point. Yeah, in like reality, once we actually, if we were to pursue this and move it forward, we'd probably have tooltips on these to help users understand what they are.
how many of these blocking violations are common? Like how, sorry, like how many is words? Like, is it often like 10, 20, 50, 100?
I think it can really depend on the size of the merge request. Certain merge requests might only have a few different ones. And I guess it's really driven by the organization's policies that they set up too. So there's certain things they can set up like security policies, which would raise certain violations here. So if they have really strict policies, you might see a lot of violations. But if they have really like loose policies, like they don't want to ever have like exposed secrets and that's it, then it may only be just a couple items. And it should expand beyond just like security stuff too, like failed pipeline jobs or lacking approval, stuff like that might also boil up into this view too.
So the idea is this functionality exists in the form of widgets today, and all of those widgets would disappear in favor of this because you can kind of triage and do some of the, like, I think with those widgets, you have to go into separate screens to mitigate. Correct. Is that right? Okay.
Yep. Yeah. It kind of creates a dedicated work area to work through all of those items.
Which that brings up a good point is there's work happening right now to update the, I think they're calling it the overview widget to be better placed to work that way.
Yep. That stemmed from, I think, this initiative too, is kind of just revising this to get rid of all those widgets and have it more focused on just highlighting what needs to be done to move the MR forward.
Yeah, right now when you click on any of those links, it'll pop a dialogue, I believe, for the most part. We're going to be changing it so you click on a link and it brings you to, in this view, the reports tab, for instance.
I had a question more along just kind of how MRs work. Can anyone or who can bypass any MRs that have blocking violations, or does that happen? Yes.
I
That
believe there are
depends.
certain people that have like full access, but security policy is when you're defining those, you can also define who, like certain people or groups of people that can unblock the MR for those specific items.
Gotcha. And I guess the follow-up question to that is, in the wild, like, is there a big or a small percentage of kind of like ignored blocking violation? Like, I'm trying to understand if the goal of making the UX and the UI clearer is to reduce like how many MRs with violations are kind of bypassed. Does that make sense a little bit? Yeah.
I think so, yeah. So I think the concept of like blocking items isn't super well communicated right now in the merge request experience. Like for instance, security policies, we don't really make a connection there between the actual findings and the policies themselves. We just require an approval for like a security approval. And I think that makes it confusing for users because they don't actually know what needs to be done on those items to remove the blockers. And so we're trying to make it more clear to users, like what actions that need to be taken on specific items to help move the process forward and unblock it. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that makes sense. Thanks.
Okay, cool.
Also, the first line of defense is actually what you're going to be working on. The first line of defense is what role these people are assigned.
I think one of the things that I'm kind of uncovering through my research is that there's like just layers of permissions within like the way GitLab is organized through like groups, projects, and subgroups. And then there's like hidden like settings of roles within each feature. Or at least like that's kind of my initial gut take without diving too deep into it.
You're right.
Yeah. There's a reason why you were hired.
So
this
so
needs
like
to get fixed.
So this like container of organization seemed to be like the solution, but I just wonder, like, does that add like I still don't know what the overriding rules are and how much granularity customers actually want within those levels.
It really depends on the customer. These questions are super gray.
Yeah.
Not every customer builds policies. Not every customer chases down security vulnerabilities and fixes them. You know, and there's also different levels of vulnerabilities. There's low, medium, high, critical. Also unknown. So there are different levels of which ones are required to get fixed. And our policies we're attempting to design our policies in a way that a company can define what their rules are. You know, they're meant to supersede any roles that a team member might have in order to ensure that the details of the security policies are being managed appropriately. They're complying with their overall company's rules. But all of this depends on the company. And even when Katie asked, how many of these can there be? Well, we tend to work in super small MRs, so that will limit the code that's being evaluated. So that should technically limit how many vulnerabilities are found. But if you're a company that believes in writing, you know, MRs that are thousands and thousands of lines of code, then you're increasing the probability that you're going to have more vulnerabilities.
Right.
You know, so it all depends on how the company works. what we're trying to do is the best we can, like their goal, the dev author's goal is to merge. So we're trying to figure out the best way to get them to be able to do that while still being safe. Like, so they can know what it is they have to do in order to accomplish that merge. Like if you want the high level goal, I got to merge my code and I have to do these a lot. Velocity matters, right? So we're just trying to figure out how can we make it as clear and painless as possible to do that.
Do we want to look at the other design concepts we have, sort of an understanding of both?
Yeah. Do you want me to drive, even though?
Yeah, if you want to, you can. Otherwise, I'm happy to do it too. I've got it right here.
Okay.
So this is sort of an evolution, and Justin, if you want to talk about it, you're more than welcome to. But
no, you start off, and I'll just jump in and highlight stuff.
Okay.
Becca, hang on a second. Becca wanted to say something. Different personas can have different goals too. Security teams want to review all blockers. Developers want to be unblocked and have sec team deal with it later. Hopefully AI can help devs get unblocked and teach them how to remediate vulnerabilities or do it for them, but it's not reliable enough right now. Yeah, that's another great point too, is when it comes to hierarchies of companies, just like UX, they hire lots and lots of engineers and not very many UX designers. They hire lots and lots of engineers and not very many security engineers. So the ratio to security engineers to engineers is way skewed. So engineers would like to just be like, you guys fix this. I don't know how to do that. But there's just not enough of them. So that's another reason why we're shifting left. So part of our strategy, yeah, devs and sec engineers, 400 to 1. Yeah, I didn't realize it was that crazy, but I guess that makes sense. A lot of the strategies that they try to employ is to figure out if I have 5 vulnerabilities, criticals that are completely blocking me, can I pause them or make an issue and get them fixed later while I can merge now? So that's another strategy. Ultimately, I don't know if it's the safest strategy because you're still merging code that is critically vulnerable. So there's a fine line between doing that or not. I think our goal is to try and help them remediate right there in the MR if possible. Cool. Thank you.
Cool.
Well,
Yeah, that was a good clarification.
Do you have anything else to add, Becca?
I'm gonna try to talk. Okay,
Oh,
this
no.
is also we could do a better job of helping developers write safer code as they're writing it, right? That's something that we haven't explored a lot of yet, but that would also that then they're not getting to the merge request page where they're ready to ship.
Yeah, we're working on things in the IDE right now for getting SAST. SAST is a code scanner. It's a pre-code scanner, basically. It looks at your code before it's been released. So we're trying to figure out how to get that in the IDE. That's an ongoing effort that will help shift left even further. Opportunities for AI to come in with code suggestions in this area as well. So there's lots of possibilities, but we're not there yet. Maybe in a year or two. Until then, please, Michael.
All right. Yeah, so what we're looking at now is sort of an evolution of, I think, the original design, actually. So it actually went through a few different phases. So we went through and did the merge request reports tab, and then we went through and explored an option in the changes tab, which had its pros and its cons, but it didn't really gain traction. And so I think this is Andy's sort of attempt to bring it all together and sort of revise it a little bit more. But really, it's a very, very similar concept where on the main overview page, you sort of have this super widget, which helps users understand what's blocking the MR. And then we have it so it would help direct users to a dedicated tab. In this case, it would be the checks tab. And this basically it does a very similar thing where we're servicing blockers and potentially segmenting them down by their categories here, but then also servicing warnings and things of that sort. So it's really similar. I think some of the big differences is obviously how information is displayed, and then the fact that we're on the sidebar segmenting stuff by blockers and warnings versus, which we could do in the first concept too, but there's no sort of dedicated like security report or code quality report or anything like that.
Well,
And
there
so
is.
really
It's just that those were left how they work now.
Sure, yeah, I suppose so. Well, I guess to some degree you'd have what the security widget would be gone. So to go to like a full security report related to the actual changes for the merge request, you'd have to go to that pipeline report, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So it would work the same. And just this was one of the questions that Michael wrote up in the agenda too. This is the difference between having a structured list of reports that you can review versus just a list of blocking objects.
And I think one thing to add to this too, so both concepts, regardless, we'd want to show any findings that are directly related to code within the code changes itself. So currently we're working on an implementation of inline findings that use severity icons as sort of the indicator in the gutters. But Andy's concept here, and I think there's a prototype of it, yeah, is to just use blocker or warning icons as the sort of main like indicator, and then you'd be able to hover over those and get more details around what kind of blocker or warning it is. So you kind of are obscuring the severity of and like what type of finding it is using this system, but it is a little bit more universal because I think our severity icons, while they make sense to us, like they're not a universal icon system. So like the triangle versus like a square versus a circle might not mean anything to other people outside of our organization. And for what it's worth too, I was just looking through Andy's designs last night, and he did a really good job sort of framing the whole problem space too and where we want to go. So like he has all of the jobs to be done, which is what it linked in the document, but sort of mapping out the vision here around the overview tab, the changes tab, and the checks tab, and the warning systems and stuff. So I think it's regardless of which direction is the right direction, I think this all still applies pretty well. And he even goes into summarizing like what should all go in the checks tab. And I think it'd be the same for the reports tab around like, this is all the stuff within the merge request that sort of can be checked or like has the automated pipeline doing stuff for it. And this is the scope that Andy narrowed down for what he was thinking should be included in it at first. So it kind of helps frame the problem a little bit more as these screens is what I'm getting at.
Yeah. Can you go back to the checks view so we can look at the difference between the drawer? Yeah, right here, wait,
yep.
A little further left. So in the first design, there was this concept of a drawer where it pushes everything over when you click it. In this design, it's leveraging if you've ever worked in an MR and you're in the diffs page and you say, I want to edit this line of code, it expands right there, and then you can deal with it. That's what this is doing too. So when you see a vulnerability on line 24 and you click on that in that left, see that left red icon, you click on that, it'll expand right there and show you the vulnerability information. So it's sort of leveraging that pattern, whereas the drawer is in the other design is leveraging the drawer pattern. You know, there's pros and cons to both, but that's also one of the things that we wanted to get thoughts on.
So the actions the user can take in both of these options are the same. I am able to stay in the MR view and remediate or dismiss the blocker in both options that you showed, right?
Yes, all of the abilities won't change. Got just it. How they're presented would. And another thing to keep in mind is, and Becca, you can help me out with this because I'm not entirely sure what's happening with explain this vulnerability and remediate this vulnerability or fix this vulnerability. right now, the way it's designed is when you look at the detail view of a MR, there's a action to have it explained, which then opens a drawer. So that would have to exist here as well, somehow or another. So that means if you already have a drawer, then you're going to have another drawer. Now, I don't know if you caught this, but the way Michael was doing the drawers and the other design wasn't really a drawer. It was a panel. Because then when he clicked on something else, it actually opened a drawer on top of it. So that's doable, right? That would work. But if it's a drawer, like is actually being built right now, a drawer on top of a drawer I'm not sure about that UX.
I've actually done it in a few different parts of the application where it's sort of a progressive step, but it's definitely not necessarily the best, where like you have a main drawer and then you click on something and it takes you to sort of a next level where you can then back out of it. So it's using sort of a similar mobile like design pattern where you kind of progressively move through screens. So it is possible. It's just, it has the potential to be confusing for users if you don't build it right.
I just wanted
The
to
design
point out
that you're currently showing, it gives the indication that each one of these is a relatively small task and I'm going through like a quick to-do list versus, which I don't know how long does it take to remediate or
I think it
because
depends on the issue. But yeah, sorry to cut you off.
Oh no, it's just like everything is in this like this view is kind of rather busy compared to the other one, like the hierarchy, and there's like lots of things going on. But the benefit of the view with the 3 columns is I'm just going to sit down and I can see everything all at once, and I'm going to go like 1 2 3 4 5. That's what this feels like it's conducive to, whereas the other design was a bit more like I don't know, like taking up more space. So these things that are highlighted, you can have this accordion and then it shows a lot more details.
Yeah, that's a really great point, because that was kind of one of our goals, is to provide a checklist. These blockers are a checklist to getting to merge. These are the things you've got to do before you got to get rid of these before you can merge. So whichever one of those is bringing that principle forward or more strongly, that's something to consider. But you also mentioned it was noisy.
Yeah, it's a bit, I think one of the things that Michael actually highlighted that maybe could be brought into the other thing is the there's a lot of, and I know this like Comic Sans, so I know we're not talking so much about the visual, but there's a lot of visual things going on here. A lot of icons, a lot of colors. There's those hexagons and thing paradigms from security things. There's also this orange badge that says detected. These are all kind of shouting different things at me. Like orange means warning, but this is a blocker. Like I did think in the other design, the severity and like, oh, these things need my attention and these don't. I don't know fully your users, but I think organizing them by blockers and warnings rather than by type might make more sense, because you said the engineer's goal is to get this merged. Well, then the blockers need to be resolved and the type is maybe a little bit less relevant.
Yeah, I think that's very, very valid and makes a lot of sense. I think the question, and it's sort of a sidetrack to this, is like thinking about certain domain experts and stuff like that, like having a dedicated security report for them to come and see sort of a single place for all of the results of a certain type and be able to triage those and say like, okay, this one isn't a blocker, but it's something we should fix, versus like this sort of view. I guess it does handle that because all those items would show up under warnings then, but it's just a different perspective and way of going about it.
Yeah, and going back to the 3-column view versus this one, I'm trying to think about maybe a similar workflow that I do, which is like responding to comments on a merge request. If I had comments that needed my attention on a merge request in this view where I could click through the list and then on the other side would be the comment, I think that would deeply stress me out because each one needs so much thought and care, and I really like need to laser focus on what I'm doing, and a lot of times I need a lot of thought and discussion about each single thing that I'm responding to. So I wonder like
So you want like a more focused view? Is that what you're kind of getting at?
yeah, I think that I'm maybe leaning a little bit more. I don't know if these are just like quick check and move on, but if they need more thought, there's just a lot of information and red things. And I might prefer a bit more of a focused view.
Yeah, they're probably not all just quick hits, you know. There's thought that would need to go into some of these. So Andy and I were talking about the other design, we were trying to focus on the principle of a checklist. So the super widget that Michael mentioned earlier, I was calling it the mergeability widget, because that overview screen is your list of things that you need to clear in order to merge. That's your checklist, in other words. And then,
yeah, but
go ahead. I was gonna say, and then when you go to the checks tab, that's where you just start to hack it out and do those things, you know.
Yeah,
but
I
I'm not
think
sure
that
it's
is
that clear on this view.
I think that's like the pattern of if like to-dos, for example, in GitLab, where it's like, here's like the quick overview of all the things that's valid, but I still go to a separate place to go and deal with the things because the things that I'm doing are complicated.
Yes.
Yeah, that's very true. And I think it's worth mentioning that the mergeability widget or the super widget here just really provides a summary of the items that need to be done. And the checks tab or the reports tab or wherever we're sending users, like we need a dedicated area where they can learn more about those items, get information, and then actually act on those items.
Yeah, this tab is where you do the stuff. It's where you deal with it. You know, just like you said, the to-dos list is your list of to-dos, and then you click on things and you go deal with it. But then you presumably would go back to the to-dos once you've done that one thing and do the next one in the list. You know, so that left column was meant to sort of represent that list of things. You know, it would bring in what you were just looking at on your super widget, and hopefully that would act as your navigation list where you can click on them in order to jump to the detailed views of each. We played with an idea of putting something next to the edit button. I don't think it's in this design anywhere, but it was sort of a progress meter concept where it would sort of say, you know, you've got 5 of 10 left to do.
Is right in this file somewhere.
That feels a bit flawed though, if it's a progress bar, because one of them might take 5 times the amount of time as the rest of something.
Yeah, and that's not the only flaw, but it would have to have been sort of jerry-rigged to some degree, because the accounts change. And there's another aspect that we didn't tell you all, but there's a new type of scanner that happens in the background that's constantly scanning and looking for updates to the list of vulnerabilities that the world has found. And even though you're not technically running a pipeline that will run a scanner, it's possible that will come in and tell you that, you know, yesterday you had 5 vulnerabilities, but now you've actually got 10. And then you're like, I didn't do anything. How do I have 10? It's because the world changed when you weren't looking, and now there are more vulnerabilities. So that's why we took it out, because there's just too many problems with it. But the gist was we were trying to figure out a way to really communicate how far you are to merge.
I wonder if you could explore, I think the to-do list concept comes out really clearly in the 3-column view, but I wonder if you could explore the, in mobile, I think it's called like a master view, detail view, where it's like you click and then it goes into, rather than like the drawer, and then you can go back, but perhaps you could stay still on this screen.
So sort of
so
progressive
that when
disclosure.
Yeah, yeah, exactly, progressive disclosure.
Yeah, that might make sense.
It's a new pattern though. We love that at GitLab. Just new UI things.
Yeah. I guess the question and the thing to consider that is it helpful to sort of see the full list in context of the detail? Maybe so, maybe not. Yeah. But I think either way, this sort of concept would probably need to go down to what you're saying on smaller screen sizes, because there's no way this 3-column view is going to work on like smaller like tablets or things like that. Not that I'm sure there's a ton of people doing merge request reviews on tablets, but I'm sure it's that population is probably growing every day. So maybe it does make sense to just leverage that as the main sort of way to triage this, and it gets sort of a lot of this other stuff out of the way.
Question to that thought. Could you do one fix that solves maybe more than one to-dos?
Yes, there is, I guess, like one simple example of that. I don't know if it's actually linked up in here or not. There's the concept of basically being able to bulk like do actions on these. So you could click on like 3 vulnerabilities and dismiss them all at once. But I don't know, like for instance, like if you wanted to resolve the vulnerabilities, the resolution may have to happen in like 3 or 4 different locations. They might be the same vulnerability, but it might exist in a couple different places. So you might be able to use the same fix, though I don't know that we're necessarily facilitating that process here.
Gotcha. I guess in just thinking about whether or not, like for me, I'm a clicker. So like if I'm clicking through the to-do list and I notice that maybe 3 of these things would be fixed by going to just like one area of the code or one location, then that would be helpful to have kind of this quick drawer on the side, so I could like understand in my mind that like, oh, okay, I need to go to this one thing to fix it, and that checks off like 3 or 4 of these things.
Yeah, that's a very fair point. And I think that actually ties back to Camelia's work that she was talking about last week around security approvals. In her design concept, she was segmenting policies or vulnerabilities by like the security policies, because they could have different approvers. So this group of violations, you might have 3 of them that could be approved by one person. And then you have 3 other violations that need to be approved by somebody else. So I think that's something to consider too, and gives a little weight to your feedback there.
Could you get rid of the most left column, and just allow rather than this saying blocking violations, it could be all, and have a default sorting of like what Andy's design was, so blocking, I forget, warning or whatever, because that might make the view a little bit more calm.
Yeah, I think it certainly is a possibility. I think as long as we didn't want these like individualized reports, like for each type of thing, I think that pattern would make a lot of sense. Because then you just have like your blocker, your failed, your warnings, and your past items, and you could segment that way. So you're essentially saying like taking these main things and like moving them across the top as separate tabs, or they just be like
I would just put
groupings?
them exactly how they were in the other design. Those like blockers, and then your checklist, all the blockers.
Oh, sure.
Warning, checklist, all the warnings. And then that's 1/3 of the screen. And then 2/3 is the detail view.
Sure. Yeah, I think that's definitely viable. I'm just trying to think.
So it's basically email. It's kind of like an email view.
Yeah.
Wait, how?
Email has a left panel of all your emails. You can multiple select them. When you click on one, it gives you the detail in 3/4 of the screen.
Oh, my email works different than yours.
Oh, I don't use Google.
Outlook.
I use Spark, yeah, or Outlook. Spark is a similar layout than Outlook. So yeah. Sorry, I forgot about Google. I hate Google now.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a possibility, is sort of take these high level categories for blocker warning and sort of build these groupings and then put them hierarchically throughout. I know there'll be like Andy was exploring showing past like items that have been like properly passed. So all good, no issues in this list as well. I don't know if that would be, obviously that'd probably end up further down the list. We'd have blockers first, then warnings, and then past items. I don't know where I'm going with this. I'm just kind of thinking it through and talking out loud about your concept. But I think it does make sense and it could be a valid direction.
You mean past as in like this is fixed now?
Yes.
Remediated.
Yes.
I
Remediated.
feel like that maybe you can surface that in the activity or somewhere else. If your concept is we want a checklist, I don't know if you maybe need to surface that.
Yeah. And the only reason I brought that up is because I was looking at Andy's explorations and he had the past here, like items, but maybe it doesn't matter at all in this view because maybe people don't care. But I suppose
Yeah.
on the flip side of stuff, some of this information that's passed, like you may still want to look at the details of it.
But can you not see that in other parts of GitLab? Because at the moment in the MR, if you have this stuff going on, you go into like security vulnerabilities workflow. Like it's accessible somewhere, right?
I think, yeah, today it is, but I think part of this redesign is trying to get a lot of that off the overview page and move it somewhere into a dedicated area. I could be misinterpreting Andy's ideas there. Look at his concept on the overview page here. Yeah, because I think what you're talking about is a lot of that stuff where you can go and dig into that information is all linked to from these widgets today. And if we remove a lot of these widgets, then they'll need some sort of place for that to live.
Mm.
And I could be misrepresenting what you're saying too.
Yeah, I think it's just a progressive disclosure thing. Like when a comment is resolved on a merge request, it's very, very, very de-emphasized in the UI. So it's there if I want to go hunting for it, but it's not shouting at me. So maybe that's the solution.
Sure. Yeah, I think that can definitely work.
We're running out of time. I did want to see about the first question that we were trying to find out is what is the ideal indicator system for findings, severity icons versus blocker warnings?
And I think that definitely comes into hand specifically even in the changes tab, how we want to indicate stuff there. And it probably makes sense to carry that over to the checks tab or reports tab or whatever. So as it stands today, we're using severity icons in the gutters, but the warning versus blocker system is another possibility here.
Yeah, it's a tough one because the goal of the MR is to remove blockers.
Mm-hmm.
The goal of security is to communicate severity to help them know what they need to remove blockers. But then if it's a blocker, then presumably if the policy is written correctly, it wouldn't matter what severity it is because the blocker is already looking for the right severity, or it wouldn't be a blocker.
Yeah, and I think ultimately, like developers probably don't care about severity all that much, except for they understand that like critical severity is probably something important they need to deal with. But the ultimate like thing is that they just want to remove whatever items and deal with whatever items that they need to get their merge request moved forward. So if there's a critical severity finding that's not required to be fixed, they might not care to even look at it.
That title that says critical security finding, is that representative of what it would actually say?
Yep. Yeah. Then, critical is like a status of the security findings. So like here's all the different possibilities. You could have multiple on the line too, but you have like minor, medium, critical.
This view is I want to know what's blocking the MR, and I think the little idiosyncrasies of what severity the blocker is. So these like hexagon and our special icons. Like if you go back to that view that I just asked a question about, there's a badge that says blocker. Sorry, one over that way. Yeah, there's a badge that says blocker. There's a no entry icon, and then there's a red hexagon. So blocker badge feels maybe unnecessary, and also I would maybe remove the red hexagon because the information is conveyed by the text critical security finding.
Yeah, I
But we
think
need some
that's
way to mark it inside the div view that there's something there on that line of code.
Katie, are you saying that you would keep the blocker, the violation on?
Yeah, so the if the thing is I want to get this unblocked, I'd have the no entry sign rather than the red hexagon. I would remove the red. And I would remove also the text that says blocker, because like
we're looking at blockers.
we're looking at the blockers.
Yep.
You mean the badge, I think?
Pill? What's it called?
That's a
That
badge.
thing.
Badge,
Yeah.
I think. Yeah.
I was looking at them
Yes.
very closely this morning, so it's a badge.
Cool. Today
Yeah.
I learned.
Yes, I do see
It's
the
that badge.
argument for going towards the blocker icon rather than the severities.
Yeah, it's a little bit more of a universal language that can apply to anything, not just security stuff. And it
Especially since our
potentially-
primary user is the dev. They don't care about the level. They just care about them being able to merge. The security engineer probably wants to make sure that they're catching criticals, but that's like a tertiary or whatever quadrupiary goal or review might be, you know. It's just to make sure the policy is working, which they could do somewhere else.
Yeah.
Is the thought that we would list the blockers in terms of like the code like in the file, or are you thinking it would be sorted by like highest severity at the top?
Are you talking in the checks view or reports view versus the? I think it would probably boil up to like you group them by type first. So like similar to this concept where they're sort of grouped by vulnerabilities and secrets and stuff. And then from there, you'd have the most critical ones first.
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
Yeah. All right. Any final thoughts?
This is so hard. Oh, Andy
Yes.
originally had a like security tab. Is there a reason we moved away from that? I know when I did research with developers, they liked it to be in context of the code. So I'm guessing that's why.
Yeah, I know this security tab was presented like 4 years ago, that concept. And I think the reason why we didn't pursue it here is because we wanted to create something that's a little bit more universal that can apply to other things outside of security, even though most likely a lot of the stuff you'll see here is related to security.
And the thing about the code, you're aware of why we don't just put this in the diff. I think that it actually will be in the diff as well. We haven't even, or the changes tab, we haven't even touched on that. Any relevant, you can look to the left screen, any relevant vulnerability that is specific to code, you can technically see it in the gutter and the changes tab. But the problem is not every vulnerability that we find is related to code. So we needed a place to put it. So that's where this concept of a single tab that will have all of your blockers listed in it would go. Now they could still go to their changes tab and do that, but from a blockers perspective, I would just go to the checks tab.
Yeah, you don't get the complete picture of everything if you just go to the changes tab.
Yeah, but what I presume would happen for people that are currently in that workflow where they just deal with the diff is they start with the overview thing. They see their super widget that says you've got 20 blockers. They go to their changes tab. They clear everything out. They go to the overview again and they see they have 5 blockers still. And then they're like, what? They'll click it. It'll bring them to the checks tab. So until they build up that workflow to just go to the checks tab, either way, I think we're catching those workflows, but still, there's no other, I don't know how else to do it, except unless we did what we were planning on doing with you, Becca, was just put the non-code stuff at the bottom, but people didn't like that.
Yep, that was our most recent concept before Andy did this, and it got shut down. So seems like it's been explored a couple times.
Yeah.
I guess I have that right here for somewhere. Doesn't really matter. Oh yeah, right
We've
here.
gone in circles. We've gone in circles for sure. All right, y'all.
Anyhow.
This is a lot of great information. Thank you. I appreciate it. Be interesting to see where this goes.
Thanks, team.
Yeah, thanks for all the
Thanks, y'all.
feedback. Super helpful.
For sure.
Good
Have a
luck.
good rest of your day. Thanks.
Bye, all.